So we've just heard from Fiona about her ideas on our big question, does autism exist? And I'd like to ask the same question of you, please, Tony.
Okay, I'm going to slightly sidestep this a little bit, because I think the question, does autism exist, really is a reference to, is our definition fit for purpose? Because my daughter would still be my daughter, whether the label of autism existed or not, and Damien would still be Damien, and George would still be George. So I think the more we learn, the more likely it is we're going to have to go back and revisit some of the foundational blocks that underpin our understanding of autism. One of my bugbears is autistic spectrum disorder. I don't think it's a disorder, I think it's a difference, and I think diversity has served humans really well up to this point. So when my daughter, who most of the time is a really proud Aspie girl, faced the issues of suddenly Asperger's is being removed, that actually cut to the heart of her identity. And we had to accept that at the end of the day, regardless of the label, she'd still remain her. So wonderful and whole and gifted. So there's an issue with falling into the euphemisms arms race, though, with labelling and changing names, etc. So the key lesson for me is this. Whatever it's called, it exists. Are there different presentations of this thing? Yes. Are we probably talking about things? Possibly. We need to be able to define those with some certainty. But the key lesson from history is our diagnostic term, whatever it is, shouldn't become a clinical accusation of this is who you're not and this is what you can't achieve. That's always the danger with having a label. But going forward, I think the real answer to these questions, does it exist, should be posited to people living their lives through the label that we give to people. So I think autism does exist, but I think it exists more than the doctors would perhaps present it as, because I think it's a cultural and I think it's a very human phenomenon.
Damien, what do you think about our big question? Does autism exist?
Well, I guess it would depend on what definition of autism you're using. Because as a single diagnostic thing, in many respects you could say it doesn't, as one thing that applies to everyone equally. In terms of what it's referring to, though, as a description, neurological, dispositional, developmental diversity certainly does exist, quite obviously, I think. And the categories and words we use to describe that, as we've seen, constantly change and improve over time. So whether we're still calling this spectrum autism in the years ahead is possibly anyone's guess as knowledge improves. But neurological diversity and the kinds of things that we associate with autism are very real and very real for the people experiencing them.
George, what do you think of our big question? Does autism exist?
I think autism exists in as much as that's a useful thing. So people might get an autism diagnosis and have that lead to services for them, enabling them to access services. I think autistic people tread a fine line, really, between, on the one hand, trying to show that they're disabled enough to warrant those services, but on the other hand, wanting autism to be seen as a difference. So it's about diversity as well. So yes, I think on the whole, autism is a useful construct for us to use.